Oh, Xbox. Never before has a company been so back and so gone at the same time. On the heels of what undoubtedly is one of their best showcases in years, as far as just hyping people up, not only for the return of exclusives with Gears E-Day and Clockwork Revolution. Gears, I'm a little more touch and go on. I fell off that series ages ago. But Clockwork, whew, now that's my jam. That looks amazing. Never mind all the games that are coming to Game Pass, which there is a lot, and a lot of really good looking titles. But we're less talking about that. I'm talking more about the oh my god, we're so gone portion of that, which is all the news that has come out afterwards. Some of it is good, some of it sounds really bad. And if we parse through a few things, I think we can come out with a clearer picture of what's going on over there. Now, what we have is if you've been gaming on Xbox as long as a lot of us have, going all the way back to the OG, we know that since Xbox One, we have been precariously teetering on this edge of Sega Dreamcast territory for a while. And that's nothing that should be news or surprising to anybody. Non-Matric, absolutely burned, like napalm burned any goodwill Xbox had with the Xbox One and his attitudes. Now, here's the thing. That put the bar so low, and this is one of the things I think is crystallizing under this first 100 days of Asha Sharma's rule, has been really showing how low the bar was for Phil Spencer to look good as comparative to the amount of heavy lifting Asha Sharma is doing right now is wild. Because really, let's look back at it. What was one of the first things Phil Spencer did when he came in? Backwards compatibility. And that immediately threw so much goodwill his direction that he had a cakewalk from there. All he had to do was just don't step on rakes. And then he launched Game Pass, which was like a whole other, huge thing that garnered a lot of goodwill, because now it's like, oh, you're telling me I can pay like $20 a month and I get, State of Decay 2 and I get Forza and I get Halo and I get all these things. Damn well, hey, all right. So again, bringing up a lot of goodwill. Where it starts to fall apart is in actually competing and actually doing things to really put Xbox into the #1 spot. It's now very clear that he had put all his eggs into mergers and acquisitions to pump content into Game Pass in hopes that Game Pass would sell systems. And it never really got there. But the problem is the content hasn't been there. Yes, there's been some, but none of the system sellers. You've had Halo mismanaged by 343. Bungie would have been the smarter purchase. But, so Halo's been on a downward slide. No new Elder Scrolls. No new Fallout. No, I don't count Fallout 76. Fallout 76 was never, even though it's made up a lot of ground since its botch launch, that was never going to be a system seller. Let's be clear about one thing. As much as I love the genre of the MMO, even as a primary solo player, like World of Warcraft is like in my top 5 favorite games of all time. They don't sell systems. They don't sell consoles, period. They just don't. Single player experiences sell consoles. You know, Madden is never going to sell a console. It just isn't. It just isn't. No one's buying a specific console because Madden's on there. You know, they're going to play it on whatever their platform of comfort is, whether that's PC, Xbox, Switch, PlayStation, you know, whatever it is. So there's never been any real big system sellers in a while, because anything that's come out that you could point to, you know, like I said, Halo, I mean, Halo's been on a downward slide since 343 took over. So there's no hype there. So all those eggs were in one basket. I mean, and you can look at some of the hardware choices. I mean, the Series S and the Series X. I get the idea of the Series X having a lower price point, but that just undercut how many people bought a Series X. And you look at the controllers. I mean, yes, the Xbox controller is still a very nice controller, but we're operating on 15 to 20-year-old tech. There's been no improvements. So again, we're in a situation where you could see now, looking at it in hindsight, that Phil was just kind of hoping Game Pass would sell systems, and it just wasn't. And it just didn't have the content there to do it. There was no big wow game that was getting people willing to drop $600 on a new console. That was only going to come from an Elder Scrolls 6 or a Fallout 5 at this point. Because Forza isn't going to do it. Driving games aren't system sellers. There's a very small amount of people. And Halo had washed its reputation, was just totally washed at this point. So Halo wasn't going to do it. I don't even think necessarily that, I mean, maybe Gears will be, but I can't guarantee it. Now, you look at what's happened over the last 100 days, and Asha Sharma is out there making moves. Moves that, in some of these cases, require big balls. Big balls. Rug pulling the Halo trailer and Gears of War from Sony. Those take some grapefruits. You know, I mean, that is a huge move. And it's a move that builds confidence in the Xbox player base, that's for sure. But then we get to, like I said, a lot of the news that we're hearing after this. Hard choices. Rumors of spinning off Xbox as its own wholly owned subsidiary or partnering with somebody. And there's a lot of doom and gloom that we are now much deeper into that kind of Sega Dreamcast territory. But I think we have to parse a few things here. We have to put the corpo hat on. So rightfully so, we understand that hard choices, 99% of the time, layoffs, studio closures. And you're absolutely right for that. But hard choices also means, where do we risk burning certain bridges? And I think you're seeing that in some of the actions towards Sony. Rug pulling the trailer for Halo out of their state of play, and rug pulling Gears E-Day. And potentially Clockwork. Because we don't know if that was going to be multi-platform or not. So you've got at least 2 games that got pulled from being multi-plat, and a major trailer pulled from their showcase. Now, obviously, being publisher of Call of Duty is going to keep that tenuous relationship okay, but this also is what hard choices can mean. Where do we spurn Nintendo? Where do we spurn PlayStation? But not so badly that they balk at, say, we make a Halo multiplayer client, much in the way that, say, Call of Duty has, um, they're kind of separate of the single player game. I can't think of the name of it because I'm not big on Call of Duty, but they have their separate, it's like War something. And, you know, there's other games that have that where you can just download the multiplayer content, you know, where the single player is exclusive, but the multiplayer can be multi-platform. Where do we make these hard choices so that we don't completely burn that bridge, but we torch it a little? We let them know we're not playing around. Because Asha Sharma seems to really be leaning more into, like, we're going to compete now. We're done playing nice. And I can't say that I don't like that attitude. I mean, it's actually kind of refreshing after so long. I think that those particular kinds of hard choices of where to kind of punch Sony in the nose versus when to pat them on the back and shake their hand, it's a fine line, but I think that it's one that needs to be done. I think there's some, because really, what has Xbox gotten out of playing nice with Sony? What have they gotten? MLB The Show and Helldivers? Well after its prime? That's not anything. Where's, God of War? And I'm not even talking about the latest and the greatest. I'm talking, where is Spider-Man? Where is, these games that are now 10 years old, 15 years old? Where are these games? They're not coming over. Last of Us has been remade, what, 3 times? And they still don't have a port over to Xbox on that game. That game's been remastered and remade a dozen times. So Sony isn't exactly reciprocating. So there's no reason to roll out the red carpet for them with all of these single player exclusives, or what should be single player exclusives. So those hard choices are definitely necessary. But where people are worried is that Xbox is going to completely spin out. They're going to be sold. They're going to end up shuttering the hardware. I don't think that's exactly what they're talking about, because they're also talking about strategic partnerships. So, like, making it a wholly owned subsidiary, but with a special partnership. And I think what they're probably looking at here, and it's one I'm not really seeing a lot of people talk about, is probably this. Look at the success of the Xbox ROG Ally, especially the ROG Ally X. That thing is selling like hotcakes still. I think here is likely, if I'm putting on my prediction hat, I think the likeliest thing is that they spin off Xbox into its own wholly owned subsidiary, much like they did with LinkedIn. And I think they open it up to a partnership, a co-ownership of some sort with Asus to bring the cost down on the hardware side, because Asus is just manufacturing this stuff anyway. And that way, when Project Helix comes out, instead of being a $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 console, maybe, like, if the Series X sold at $600, maybe it's $700, maybe it's $800 for the Helix. And I think that's probably the most likely thing there. It's the one that makes the most sense. Microsoft still gets their money out of the hardware side of things. They still get control over the ecosystem. but they have a partnership on the hardware side. And Asus, it's kind of a win-win for them because they're manufacturing these chips for Xbox anyway. So then all of a sudden they go, oh, we can now get more of a direct kickback on the back end of things, on the sales, but also we're going to get a chunk of change from the games. So this is a win-win for us because we're going to be doing this anyway, and we're going to making this much, but not making anything off the games. Now we're going to make this much, but then we're going to make all this money on the games that we weren't making before. So I think that's kind of where I would say they're going. So I don't see hardware going away. I don't see them selling off altogether. I think that the best and most realistic option, like if I'm Satya Nadella and Asha Sharma, that's probably what I'm looking at is, okay, we're going to make this its wholly owned thing, but we're going to partner with Asus. We're going to give them 30% of the company. And, we're going to go and partner with them, so we can bring down the cost of hardware, and then they get a chunk of the game publishing. So I think that's where that's part of it's going. Now, are we going to see studio closures? Yeah. And studio closures are never fun. I don't generally like studio closures, but we gotta discuss a few really hard, tough choices that are gonna have to be made. And it's, kind of unfortunate. But the ones that I think are probably going to go, I think Double Fine is at the top of that list. Yes, they make very kind of small games. And they're very creative. But the last real game of theirs that anybody really, like, I hear good things about Keeper. But let's be honest, the last game of theirs that anybody really cared about was Psychonauts 2. And even that one just kind of did okay. They make quirky little games. And there's nothing wrong with that. But they also take a long time between those games. And that's a problem when you're making really just these kind of small, quirky games. You can't be having these turnaround times of years and years and years and years. And I know making games is a long experience, but when your little kind of indie studio is taking as long as some of these AAA studios, that's going to be a problem for, and like I said, this is me putting on corpo hat. I don't want to see Double Fine closed. Maybe they can do it the way they did with Tango, where they're like, okay, we're done with these guys, and then someone scoops up and buys them to keep them going. And then they work a strategic partnership out with them to keep the games, kind of tied to the platform. I think that's probably what you want to do with Double Fine, but I don't see Double Fine making it out of this. I think Obsidian is in trouble. I think that, while their games are decent, I think that they haven't been where they need to be. Avowed was decent, but like I said, it was good. It was fine, but it wasn't earth shattering, especially for the time and the hype. And Outer Worlds 2 was just kind of more of the same. It wasn't anything where I dove in and was just like wowed by it. It was just kind of okay. And, I think that, I think they're in some trouble. I think the only thing that's got them kind of saved is Grounded. But I think they're definitely if they're not getting close, they're definitely getting hit with layoffs. I think Arcane is probably out of that level of development. I think that Arcane is probably in the most trouble, especially after Redfall. And we still haven't heard, like, at least not that I can recall, anything new or big that they're working on. So I think that they're probably at the biggest risk of getting closed. Um, I think there's going to be big changes that, even probably say Activision Blizzard, there's going to be redirection into what takes priority. I think that's why it's going to be very important to support something like, say, the new Spyro game. So we show that, like, look, we want more of this, not so much just more Call of Duty from these guys. And so, it's going to be very important to support a game like Spyro. I think Undead Labs, I think, is safe. Yes, they've taken way too long with State of Decay 3. But I think with that one being a solid multi-platform, multiplayer environment where you can have that big co-op experience, I think they're kind of safe. It's not live action, but it's live action enough that they're going to make some money on it. As long as it doesn't release as a complete buggy travesty. It looks good. It looks like it plays good. And as long as it looks and plays good and has quality multiplayer, I think they're fine. Obviously, your Playground, Turn 10, like, they're fine. Forza sells. Fable is going to do well, unless they completely botch it, which I don't think they will. They don't strike me as a company that would do that. But, I definitely think the three most at risk are Double Fine, Obsidian, and Arcane. And do I want to see any of those studios close? No, not particularly. I mean, Arcane's the one I'm the least involved with because I didn't really care for their games. They always kind of hinge on a gimmick, and I don't care for gimmick gameplay. Like, I like tight, good, quality gameplay. Anything that's tied to a gimmick, that's not my thing, because then things hinge too much on the gimmick and not enough on actually, like, the core gameplay. And so I've never been big on it, but, we'll see what happens on the studio closure front, but those are the three that I think are the most at risk. Now, assuming that all of these hard choices lead to a more solid, firm base for Xbox to go forward, this is where I put on the what if I was Asha Sharma hat. What do I do to, going forward into the Helix era, what do I do to put Xbox back in that between 1 and 2, fighting it out for that number 1 spot instead of being a distant third, to get us back to that Xbox 360 era hype? What do I do? Well, 1, backwards compatibility. I don't care if you have to do it by coding some kind of emulator into the back end of the thing. I don't care if it's hardware based. I don't care how you do it. Every single Xbox Live Arcade game that was ever purchased on your platform needs to be able to be re-downloaded by the people who purchased it for play. I'm not saying you have to make them available for sale, even though I've never understood that. Why they have to go in and relicense a thing to sell it, because that's just why would you need a new deal for this? Is what I don't understand about these companies. It's free money at this point. If you're Activision, if you're Konami, if you're Capcom, and you had all these games and classic games and whatever on Xbox Live Arcade, it's free money. You don't have to do anything for it. They're making it playable on the system. You just need to make it okay for them to sell it. You don't need a new deal. The 10%, 50%, 30%, whatever it is, that's free money at this point. These games are 20 years old. Let them sell them again. Why delist them? It's free money. Free money. It costs you nothing. So I'm making that case. If I'm Asha Sharm, I'm making that case to all of these people who had Xbox Live Arcade or Xbox Games on Demand games on the 360 era. Make them available for sale again. Make them downloadable for those who have already purchased them. Make it to where if I go out to GameStop or my local, video game store, mom and pop, and buy an Xbox original disc, an Xbox 360 disc, I can pop that in and play it. Backwards compatibility is number one on my list, because that will do a lot of goodwill for people who have big collections, who maybe have been sitting out the more modern stuff. That's enough to make them maybe go, huh. Like, I can pop in my copy of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the Xbox into my Helix, and it not only plays, but it's upscaled and it looks better. Sign me up. A lot of people will do that. Not saying it's going to sell a ton of systems, but it'll sell some. There are some people who will do it for the upscaling. Absolutely. There are people who pay $200-300 for crazy upscalers for their old consoles now. So tell them not only you're going to get pay all the new hotness, but it's also going to do exactly what that $200 upscaler is doing for you, all in one device. Yeah, they'll go for it. They'll go for it. Absolutely. So that's number one. Number two, I'm bringing some of the fun back into the UI. What the Xbox 360 had was this UI that was supremely functional, well organized, but also fun. The blades were fun. It was a cool thing. Now, I'm not saying you got to go back to the blades, even though there is a contingent of Xbox fans who are like, bring back the blades. But do something that has life to it. It's a small thing. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think for UI to UI between PS5 and Xbox kills it on their UI. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with what works now, but you want to make some changes to bring some life back into that UI the way that it had on the 360. Next thing, because we're also talking about shoring up the community, avatars. Bring back avatars. That's another, yes, there's some cost to it, but it's a cost that you can, your core hardcores who are out there, these are your day one buying an Xbox above everything else that they could buy. They're going to get into that, and they're going to buy the cosmetics, and they're going to support it. So that's another small thing you could do. The next thing, yes, exclusives. Prioritizing Xbox first above all else. Yes, have your big multiplayer things that make sense to have multi-platform. Go for it. Do it. But you need to prioritize things like Elder Scrolls, Fallout, those kind of things for Xbox. Halo for Xbox. If you want to make the multiplayer thing a separate client, go for it. Sell it for $20. I'm sure there's lots of PS5 guys who will buy it for $20 just to play the multiplayer. Go for it. But if they want story mode, they got to come to Xbox. So that's another thing I do. Franchises. Rare. Yeah, they're doing great with Seas of Thieves. It's making them a good chunk of change. We need a legit Banjo. Banjo-Kazooie needs to come back. Conquer needs to come back. They need new games. And no, They don't need to be $200, $300 million 100-hour epics. Tight gameplay. You know, what were the first games? Maybe 10 hours, 20 hours tops? Doesn't need to be more than that. Doesn't need to be more than that. They need tight gameplay, good writing, and the humor. A proper Banjo 3 and a proper Conquers 2. Right there. Maybe a new Killer Instinct, maybe a new Battletoads. I mean, the last Battletoads did meh, but it really didn't get pushed. It got revealed and then it dropped with no hype. So, there's, 4 classic franchises right there that could be brought in to Helix. There's a ton over at Activision that could be brought back. I think one of the other things I'm doing, especially now that Guild Wars 3 has been announced that's going to PlayStation 5, guess what? Hey, Warcraft, Blizzard, guess what? You're making an Xbox port. And you're dropping it ASAP. Which is something that should have been mandated day one. The minute that they bought Activision Blizzard, that should have been day one. Well, if I'm Asha Sharma, I'm making that edict now. I know you already basically have a version built because you have console port controls built into your system now. You just don't want to do it because you think PC is the home of Warcraft. And then you wonder why your player base is hemorrhaging, because guys like me who had all the time to sit on our PC and play Warcraft are now working and have families and all this kind of stuff. We don't have time to sequester ourselves in our office or wherever our PC is and sit and play for hours a day. If we get any gaming time at all, it's in our family room on our TV. You put World of Warcraft on a console, guys like us can come back in and play it more full time. So if I'm Asha Sharma, yeah, guess what? I'm putting the call to Blizzard. Yeah, you're putting it on Xbox today. You're putting it on there yesterday. You're getting that on there because we need something to compete with Guild Wars 3. Because the thing, a lot of guys like me who like playing, fantasy MMO type games are gonna go over and play on PlayStation 5 if that's the only option. People were already doing that with Final Fantasy. I mean, yeah, we have Final Fantasy Net 14 now on Xbox, but that's years after the install base has gone over. Again, we're getting these things way too late. So WoW needs to come to Xbox. It just makes sense. Another thing, that controller, that updated controller, that's getting put to the front of the line while we work on Helix. So that we can get that out now. Soon, quickly. So that we can upgrade the player experience today. We've already seen the pictures of it. Get that thing tamped down. Get it locked so you can get it out for the people who are playing now. And one of the other things I'm doing is we got to have trade here. If you're getting this game that should be an exclusive on Xbox, if you're wanting this game so badly, you got to give us one. Like for like. I'm not opposed to doing business. If I'm Asha Sharma, I'm not opposed to doing business, but I got to get a win. If you get a win, I got to get a win. So if you're getting Halo, the new Halo remake, then I need God of War or Wolverine or Stellar Blade. I need one of those. You gotta bring one of those over to me. None of this, we just put it over there and you hoard all your shit. No, we're not playing that. Some of that's got to come over here now. That's the only way we're playing that. And she seems like she's probably willing to play more hardball than Phil ever was. Now, again, we're still very early on. So we'll see where this goes. But I still see a lot of reason to feel good about Xbox. Yes, it's going to be a bumpy road because restructurings always are. But I think we have more to be hopeful for, more to be positive about, and more to have faith in Asha's reign as head of Xbox than where we were a year ago with Phil. Let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Am I off base? Do you think I'm on the right track? What are your thoughts about everything going on at Xbox? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.